going to start with our land acknowledgement. I acknowledge that we gather today on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples who've lived in the Salish Sea Basin throughout the San Juan Islands and the North Cascades watershed from time immemorial. Please join me in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors, the Lummi Nation and Nooksack tribe, for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. My name's Terry Bryant. I am the director of the Welcome Homeless Service Center at Opportunity Council, and I'm the chair of this group. And thank you so much for joining. We have a really good group today and an interesting topic. If you'd like to introduce yourself, please do that in the chat. And if you need to be added to our mailing list, you leave your email as well, and we'll make sure to get you added. Today's topic is services for immigrants and refugees. And it's been on my mind. This is the steering committee's suggestion for our topic this month, but we're seeing an increase in immigrants and refugees in our homeless services system, and some of their barriers are very complex, more so than others. And I'm just kind of following what's happening in the news. Sorry, I need to let some more people in. I live about a mile away from work, so I'm not in the car a lot listening to NPR, but what I do listen to, kind of following what's happening in Tukwila, where there are a lot of asylum seekers that they're being sheltered in hotels. There's a church that's sheltering nearly 300 people, and they're running out of space and they're running out of funding. And what I read this morning is that the state funding will not be available to July to support those folks. So it's a crisis. We'll acknowledge that. Okay. Admitting one more person. So I want to thank our speakers for attending today. Really appreciate your time and being willingness to speak to this topic. I want to welcome Stephen Shetterly from World Relief, Norma Suarez from Immigrant Resources and Immediate Support Northwest. Pardon. I'm working from home and I didn't talk to anybody all day, so my voice is weird. Okay. Don Cook from Unicare Northwest and Andrea Cunningham from Catholic Community Services. And I'd like to get started with Stephen, if that's okay, because he has such a great way of explaining the landscape for what refugees can experience and the pathway to get into services. So I'm going to go ahead and stop talking. Turn it over to Stephen, and if you would like to share a screen, feel free. I don't think there's any restrictions on that.
Great, thank you, Terry. Thank you for the invitation to be here today and to share about this really important topic. I hope that this will be informative for you. I'm going to have to go a little bit into the weeds in terms of questions around immigration status and a whole range of different things. And I hope it'll make sense overall, like why I'm doing this, because these things really do, there's a lot of confusion about them in terms of the terminology that gets used just in general public, and there's confusion over like what services are available, what aren't, and things like that. So I'm going to try, as Terry said, to kind of lay the landscape initially, talking about a few different populations, and then I'm going to talk specifically about what World Relief as an organization is able to do and what we're not able to do as well. So let me just share my screen here and we will jump into it. All right. Okay, hopefully everybody's able to see that. Let's get into it. So first things first, I want to define some terms for us today, because the term refugee is often used kind of at its broadest level as a catch-all term for displaced people or for immigrants. So, you know, you hear terms like climate refugees, or you see news articles about refugee caravans arriving at the southern border, things like that. So I want to acknowledge that it's a term that has been part of the English language for a long time, and there's a long usage just to talk about displaced people. At the same time, the term refugee has a defined status under international law. So the United Nations has a definition of what a refugee is, and as well as that, there is a specific immigration status within U.S. immigration law that that uses the term refugee. So some people may be, one of these. They might fall under a displaced person category, but they don't meet the other two. They aren't a refugee under international law or under U.S. law. Some people might meet two of them. So they might be a displaced person. They might be a refugee under international law, but they don't have the immigration status of refugee. So it very quickly gets complex. And what I'm going to try to do for us is spend a while defining two different types of immigration status that are important to understand. And then we'll look at a couple of other ones briefly, but it does get a little confusing fairly quickly. So I am happy to share these slides if you would like a copy of them, and you can go over this again at your leisure. So to talk about refugees, we first have to talk about the idea of forcibly displaced people. So what does it mean to be forcibly displaced? And there's a range of terms that are used to describe forcibly displaced people. So we have internally displaced people, we have refugees, we have asylum seekers, asylees, humanitarian parolees, secondary migrants. All of these are forcibly displaced people, people who have been forced to flee because of persecution, because of violence, threats of violence, or a well-founded fear of persecution. Some people flee over an international border, some don't, and right there you start running into distinctions of what sort of category you would fall into. So a refugee, we're going to talk first of all under international law. What does it mean to be a refugee? So a refugee under international law, this is a United Nations definition, is someone who has fled their home country. They cannot return due to a well-founded fear of persecution based on one of 5 factors. So you have to be persecuted or in fear of persecution based on your race, religion, nationality, social group, or political opinion. And that's been a long-standing definition under international law. And notice that there are a whole range of different, very valid reasons that people might flee their country, they might leave, they might look for more opportunity elsewhere that don't fall into this. So specifically, economic opportunity, climate or natural disasters, things like that, those don't qualify a person as a refugee under international law. So it has to be threat of violence and persecution based on one of these 5 factors. And additionally, refugees reside outside of their own country. They have to have fled across an international border, and they are processed outside of the United States for resettlement. So they're in a third country somewhere. There are some exceptions to this, which we can talk about later, but those are kind of the broad definitions. So that's under international law, what a refugee is. Then we can talk about what it means to receive refugee status in the United States. And so it's really important at the start to note that not everyone who considers themselves a refugee has received refugee status under international law. So they might call themselves a refugee, but they don't meet the definition under international law. It's also important to notice that only a small percentage, so less than 0.5% of people who do receive refugee status under international law are ever cleared for resettlement in a third country in any given year. So a tiny fraction of people actually get resettled with refugee status. And there are many who choose to pursue other means of finding safety and stability for themselves and their families in a third country for very good reasons, because it takes a very long time to make your way through the official refugee process. And some people don't have the luxury of waiting. So let's look at, what does it look like to get processed, approved as a refugee, and resettled in the United States? First off, people flee their homeland due to well-founded fear of persecution. War breaks out. You flee across an international border. You end up in a refugee camp or some other sort of a setting, and you begin processing. You basically present yourself at a local NGO, and you receive status as a refugee under international law from the United Nations. At that point, you go through a variety of screening. There's screening that's done by the United Nations, and then if you're requesting resettlement in the United States, for example, there would be a whole process with our federal government of screening, so security checks, medical checks, background checks, all that kind of stuff. Refugees then make a journey. So this is all arranged through a group called IOM, International Organization of Migration. They make a journey to their new home, and then they go through a process of resettlement with a nonprofit. And so they're working towards self-sufficiency then. So this is refugee status within the United States. This is the basic path that people would follow for that. In terms of involvement of different organizations, so starting in the refugee camp or in the overseas setting, wherever that is, United Nations, US government agencies, International Organization Migration, other related NGOs are involved through all of that process up through people getting on the plane and heading to the US. And then World Relief would get involved in that resettlement. So we handle people when they get off the plane in the US. We're there at the airport waiting to pick them up. Another way to look at this is just a different means of, what are the main agencies? So people flee. At first, they're dealt with by the United Nations. Then the Department of State steps in to the process, and the Department of State hands them off on the domestic side to one of 10 different nonprofits working here domestically. Many of them are listed there that do the work of resettlement. So World Relief is one of these 10 nonprofits. Other organizations you probably heard of: International Rescue Committee, HIAS, a lot of different, mostly faith-based organizations that do this work. So the role of the resettlement agency with refugee cases is provision of core services, so case management, and it's governed by a cooperative agreement with the federal government. So we do things like make sure that they have housing taken care of, make sure that they are signed up for various social services, medical insurance, things like that, that they're having those needs attended to, getting their kids enrolled in school, making sure the adults are enrolled in ESL, and that they have, household items, basic needs provided for them. It's provided over a period of 90 days from their date of entry, and that is a term that's set by the cooperative agreement with the federal government. So we have to provide all these services within 90 days. And there are plenty of other services that are helpful, but are not required by the cooperative agreement. And we do our best to provide some of those things, but some of them are just outside the realm of what we're able to do in those first 90 days. So just some key points about this official refugee pathway. It's orderly. It includes case management. It's facilitated by the federal government. You're eligible for benefits when you step off the plane, immediately eligible for work. There's a pathway to citizenship after 5 years. On the negative side, it takes a very long time and you have a low chance of approval in that processing overseas. There's all sorts of hurdles to overcome. It's vulnerable to political considerations. But once you get that refugee status, I've just been watching Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, weird movie with my kids, but it is essentially, you get that golden ticket and you are set up. So it's weird to talk about refugees as, being the lucky ones, but they absolutely are in terms of having that status and having a pathway to self-sufficiency and services in the US, okay? So that is the pathway for refugees. Now let's talk about asylum seekers, completely different population. Asylum seekers start their journey in the same way that a refugee does. So they flee their homeland due to a well-founded fear of persecution. They end up overseas in a refugee camp or in an urban area. And then they're weighing these options of what's going to be best for me, what's going to be best for my family, how are we going to survive? And a lot of people look at the calculus and say, it could be 10 years, 15, 20 years before I get processed and approved for resettlement as a refugee. And so they take a journey on their own. So they embark on a treacherous journey spanning several nations. These are people, they might fly to Brazil, they might fly to Central America somewhere, and then work their way overland up through Central America and Mexico, arriving at the southern border in most cases, and then presenting themselves to immigration officials and claiming asylum. At that point, some are detained or others are released on their own recognizance, given a court date, said show up on such and such a date. Sometimes it's multiple years out, and that is just the start of their process to be able to claim asylum and to talk to a judge and prove that they meet this definition of being a refugee and that they should be allowed asylum in the US. So eventually there is a court date before a judge. They present their case. That might get continued multiple times, multiple years out, but eventually they are either approved or denied. If asylum is granted, then they are then considered as refugees and able to receive the same services and benefits that a refugee would. So some key points about this. It's a disorderly, dangerous, expensive process. That people are not eligible for existing case management services. There are some nonprofits that offer case management to asylum seekers, but they are few and far between because there's not a lot of funding for that. This is a process that's actively opposed or impeded by the federal government. No matter what you might hear on the news, it's not an easy process. It's something that is actively discouraged at the border in a variety of ways. People are not eligible for federal benefits. Work eligibility takes 6 months minimum, often much longer than that. There's no guaranteed pathway to citizenship. The process takes years to complete, and it could end in being deported. And despite all of those disadvantages, often seeking asylum is the only viable pathway to safety for lots of displaced people. This is just putting these two side by side so you can kind of see the difference. Obviously, refugee going that pathway would be the preferred one. And the main disadvantage is there is no guarantee that you're going to be approved as a refugee. Even if you are, it could take, I've heard 17 years. It's kind of an average time spent in a refugee camp. So we're talking, generations, people that are born and die in refugee camps in this kind of limbo world. And so obviously many people can't wait that long. They choose to go the asylum route. There are other immigration statuses, so special immigrant visas. These are often Afghans and Iraqis, people who worked with the US military. We can essentially consider them as refugees. The main difference is that special immigrant visa holders immediately have permanent residency when they land on US soil. There are humanitarian parolees. This is mostly Ukrainians and Afghans right now. And they are eligible for some benefits depending on their date of entry. It gets very complex with humanitarian parolees. It's a temporary status, usually for 2 years, which can sometimes get extended. Then there's what's called temporary protected status. That's a whole range of different populations that Congress renews or doesn't renew on an annual basis. Usually they are eligible for benefits. And then there is kind of the traditional undocumented or out of status, people who came on a student visa or a work visa, overstayed that visa. They're not pursuing asylum often, but maybe they're hoping for some other means of status adjustment. We're not going to talk a ton about those different ones, but the two main ones we want to keep in focus are refugee and asylum seeker. In terms of what we have done through World Relief, we are a refugee resettlement agency, and so we have resettled nearly 200 refugees in the 2 years that we've been open through that U.S. refugee admissions pathway. We plan to resettle 175 to 200 refugees this fiscal year. And we've also been able to provide aid to over 400 Ukrainian humanitarian parolees who've come since the start of the war with Russia. 12 different countries that people have come from to the local area, including Syria, Sudan, Afghanistan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ukraine, and Latin American countries. So I want to talk just briefly now about kind of what World Relief is and what we aren't. So first of all, what are we? World Relief is a resettlement agency. We've been doing this for 40 years in various locations around the country since the start of kind of the modern refugee admissions program. We are working with the federal government to resettle refugees that come through the U.S. refugee admissions program. So we are kind of focused on these cases which are assigned to our office by the federal government. We are responsible for those cases for at least 90 days, and often for longer than that. We can provide light case management for up to a year thereafter. We can also work with people who had refugee status, who arrived with refugee status, and they're within 5 years of their arrival date. So we can do work with those cases. You should not be seeing people showing up within the homeless services sector who have refugee status and who are working with World Relief. If you have, then we've failed greatly in some way. And so you should definitely reach out to us if someone has refugee status, if they were working with World Relief, and if they've ended up homeless on the street. So this is not a common or expected experience for people who have come through our office. World Relief, we are able to provide some limited assistance to humanitarian parolees, as I said, refugees within 5 years of their arrival, and to those who have been granted asylum. So not those who are seeking asylum, but those who have been granted asylum. We have a range of different services that we can potentially offer to those cases. We are actively seeking ways to serve other populations. We've had some work with the county to get some funding to provide some housing assistance and things like that to asylum seekers and others, but it's very limited right now. What World Relief is not, so this is also important. We are not a shelter or a provider of emergency housing, so we don't even have a receptionist. We have nobody at our front desk whose job is to greet people as they come in the front door. Like we are focused primarily on these cases that we know are coming, that are coming through this defined pathway. We're not able to provide immediate same-day walk-in service to anyone. We're not a large office with unlimited resources. We've been growing a lot, but we're still an office of just 10 people. And we're not currently able to offer many services to asylum seekers. So we don't have immigration legal assistance here at our office. We don't have employment authorization help. We do have some limited housing assistance for those who have existing leases or who are in need of deposit assistance for asylum seekers. So if someone has been able to secure a rental for their family and they have a lease, we can help with that. Or if they're able to move in, but they just need some help with the deposit, we can help with that. In terms of making referrals to us, if you have people that you think might be able to be served, that are part of one of those populations that we is more so in our wheelhouse, then please do reach out to us. Email is going to be the best way to do that. You can send an email to me and include Charity Garza, who's our resettlement coordinator. Include contact information for yourself and for your organization, as well as for the individuals in question. Let us know what languages they speak, whether an interpreter is needed, or if they speak enough English to be able to communicate about these things. And then anything you can glean in terms of status. I realize that this is it can be a sensitive topic, but if they tell you their story, if they say they came across the southern border a week ago, like that's really useful information, because that'll immediately mean that they aren't coming through the standard refugee pathway. So we know that that's, they're not going to fall into that category. So that's just going to help us to know, like, what pathway could we direct people into to receive the best services possible. And then any other pertinent info that you have on their needs. So what benefits are they receiving, any local connections, family, people that are helping them out, those sorts of things. So please do that. What I'm trying to avoid is, and what we've been getting increasingly are phone calls of, we have a family of, 5 people from such and such a country who are right here. They need housing immediately. These are things that we unfortunately are not able to help with on an immediate basis. What we are good at, what we can do, is set up an appointment with people. We can hear their story. We can look at, what documents do they have? What does this qualify them for in terms of services, and kind of do some triage and some connection to services in that way. So that is all I have for you today. I don't know, Terry, are you planning on doing questions at the end once everybody else is presented, or do you want questions specific to my presentation first?
I think questions for you would be good. That usually kind of tends to work better in terms of flow, because it's fresh in everyone's mind. And I'll just kick off the questions if that's okay. I learned something just now, and that's the asylum seeker crisis that I'm hearing about on the news. Those are people that are not going through the pathway to world relief. Those are people that are taking the less preferred path, and that's why they're having such a struggle. Is that right?
Yeah, essentially asylum seekers they're coming on their own. So they've made that equation, and it absolutely makes sense why they would do that, but they have not been assigned to our office. They're not coming through World Relief. Sometimes they will, Google, assistance for refugees, and World Relief will come up, and so they'll show up at our front door, and we do our best to assist them, but they have not been assigned to our office, and we've not facilitated their movement in that way.
That makes sense. And then my next question, and then I'll leave it for others to ask, is do you have bilingual staff, or do you use interpretation services? How do you navigate that language?
Both, and yes, we do have, we are well covered in terms of Russian and Ukrainian bilingual staff. We are actively looking to hire someone who speaks Dari and Pashto, which are 2 Afghan languages. I speak Spanish well enough to handle most situations, and we're looking to hire another Spanish-speaking staff member as well. So some, yes, but we also have access to other means of interpretation if needed. We're very used to accessing those services.
Thank you for that. Andrea, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question which I think it will kind of help everyone. Is Stephen, I'm just curious, which I'm sure everyone else is, because I think I kind of know the answer, but I'm just curious from your standpoint if anything else has come up. What services do you know of in Whatcom County that can help people with asylee status?
The asylum seeker status, or asylee means they've been granted asylum. And in that
Asylum
case,
seekers, sorry.
So I think the answer to that is there's not a lot out there that's kind of comprehensive. And we were able to do a little bit with some asylum seekers, and they cross paths with Opportunity Council, and Opportunity Council can sometimes assist in different ways, and Lighthouse Mission sometimes ends up interacting with these folks. But I don't think any agency is out there claiming the ability to provide comprehensive services to asylum seekers, and it's for a lot of the reasons that I've just laid out, which is that there really is very little funding or ability to have staffing directed toward asylum seekers, and it is a very, very long process for them to achieve anything approaching self-sufficiency a lot of times. So yeah, there aren't a lot that I'm aware of, and I think that that's kind of what this meeting is about, is to say, what can we do, what can't we do, and hopefully be able to cooperate across different agencies in terms of what we might be able to offer.
Yeah, and then I heard you say this, but I might have just missed it. But when you were saying that you can provide a little bit of deposit or rent help, what population was that for again?
That obvious, any of the people who come with refugee status or who have been granted asylum, like we have ability to serve those populations through a few different programs. For asylum seekers, if they have secured a rental somewhere, if they have a lease with their name on it, and if it's a legitimate lease, then we can help with some rental assistance. We do have some funds currently that are broad enough that would allow us to support for. We're not talking about a year long paying somebody's rent for a year or anything like that, but it would be kind of an emergency assistance of a month or two that we could do if they've got a lease, or if they're able to get a lease and the only barrier they're facing is having a deposit or something like that. Then we do have some funds potentially available for that.
Okay, so even if they don't have legal status, so if they don't have they're still in the asylum process, they could get those.
Yeah, if they have documents, so usually they're handed a document that says that they've been released on recognizance, they have an alien number that's given them by Customs and Immigration. So if they have a document that says they're here, they're claiming asylum, they just haven't had their hearing yet,
Your court date,
then we should be able to serve them. If again, the big challenge is finding a landlord who's willing to rent to them. So if they've been able to do that work, what we can't do is provide the whole housing coordination, getting them into housing. But if they have someone they're working with that they're currently renting from or something, they need an extra month or two of help, we can do that.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. I see a hand up from John.
You may have just answered this, but my question was, like, could you to go a little bit more in depth on what you're seeing in terms of the landscape with housing availability, specifically for folks with refugee status and asylum and granted asylum status, and like what are those relationships with the landlords like, and what do you think might be a way to help the helpers and step forward for this work?
Yeah, I mean, housing, I think, as everybody knows, is a big challenge for everyone in this area, and so there is limited availability. And I will say, for the people who are coming with refugee status, who are assigned to our office, the ones that we're working with for those 90 days, even with that, it can be a struggle to find something that is going to be sustainable, affordable after the end of their time of assistance and everything. So even more so, I think, for those who are seeking asylum, who maybe don't have work authorization yet and who are facing a variety of other barriers. So you've got landlords who want guaranteed income, they want they want to be able to do a background check, and so you have to have a social security number. So all these different things that end up kind of not working out for most landlords. So that is a huge challenge. And so those are barriers that we are able to overcome and to work around with, again, with the people who are assigned to our office through the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program. We're able to provide certain guarantees. But for asylum seekers who are kind of trying it on their own, usually they need to find someone in the community who's just willing to rent to them. That's mostly what we found, is they had a friend or they just came across somebody who was willing to provide housing and rent in that way. So I think a lot of the larger landlords are just not able to do that based on their policies.
So I'm sorry if I'm, do you have then like a whole, um, a whole folder of like specific landlords that you work with that
Yeah, I wish we had a whole folder. We have a few housing providers that we've developed good relationships with in the past, and who are willing to, who recognize the barriers that refugees come with and are willing to work with us and work around some of those. But again, in terms of asylum seekers or our ability to, because of the specific barriers that they face with work authorization in particular, and that ability to do a background check with a social security number, that can be a challenge. And those things asylum seekers can get, but it's usually, you have to be in the country for at least 6 months before you can even apply for social security number and work authorization. So if you've been here for a week, you're looking at a long road before you'd be able to kind of check most of the boxes for most housing providers in the area. Refugees, on the other hand, come immediately work authorized, and they get, we have a social security number for them within a few days of their arrival. So, Kate has a question, but can't raise her hand.
Sorry, I couldn't, for some reason, don't see the button today. Yeah, I noticed on your, I think I've looked at your website before, Stephen, and I noticed you do have a host family or a host home opportunity. Is that something, can you maybe speak to the current need? Is that something you have a big need for? Do you have plenty of people signed up for that?
Yeah, no,
there...
absolutely. That is something we're always looking for. And particularly, again, I mean, our main focus is on the refugee cases that are assigned to our office who are coming through U.S. Refugee Admissions Program. That's who we have tended to use host homes for. And so it is, you go through a volunteer onboarding process with us, background check, everything. We check out the space that's available, make sure that it's going to be suitable. And that is usually for, anywhere from 4 weeks to sometimes up to 2 months. Sometimes it goes a little over that, but that is while we're searching for permanent housing for people. And so in the past, we were able to just rely on host homes and then get people into permanent housing. Lately, we've had to rely on hotels, and that obviously increased costs and everything. But that is something we're always looking for. So if you have connections or people are interested in providing housing, who have a mother-in-law suite, or occasionally we work with people who even have a couple of extra bedrooms in a house, something like that, then that is, we'd be very interested in hearing from people who are wanting to do that and provide that service. It's a huge benefit to us and allows us to save refugees funds, the limited funds that they come with. We can save that for their permanent housing rather than spending it all on temporary housing. Oh, Adam, who is our housing specialist, says that he is on the Zoom call now as well. And so if we have any specific housing questions, he's worked in housing and in this world for a number of years as well. So yeah, I don't know, Adam, did you have anything you wanted to say specifically regarding housing or any of those previous questions? Oh, no, he says he's involved in another conversation right now.
Oh,
never mind.
that happens.
False alarm.
Any other questions for Stephen?
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I cut you off there, Stephen. I'm sorry. Did you have something to add?
Nope. No, I think that was it. I think, what I'm really hoping to do is to provide kind of the backdrop of, if you were to call World Relief and say, don't you help refugees? Just realizing this is a very complex question in terms of status, of funds available, and the fact that we are very focused on making sure that the refugees who we have agreed to receive and who are assigned to our office, that they are stable and in a good spot. And so We want to do what we can and to provide services outside of that realm and understand why we would be approached to, with questions about that. But at the same time, I'm hoping that people can understand sort of the main focus for many years in the past has been on that core piece of the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program and the work that we do with those participants who come through. So we are doing our best in realizing that this is a growing issue in the community. And so we definitely want to be able to be a part of the conversation and to provide help where we can along the way. But hoping that we also realize the limitations that are out there in terms of serving these populations.
Thanks, Stephen. That was really helpful to kind of understand the different paths and the different statuses and why it's so difficult for some and maybe not so much for others. There's different ways of getting assistance. So thank you.
Absolutely.
We ought to move on to Norma. Thank you so much for being here, Norma, from Iris Northwest. Is that okay to say, or should I Immigrant Resources and Immediate Support Northwest?
That's a mouthful. You can say Iris.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, no, thank you, Stephen and his team. I will really for everything that they're doing. So, like you said, my name is Norma Suarez and I'm with Immigrant Resources and Immediate Support, IRS for short. And what we do, so Stephen kind of laid it down. We serve undocumented people, people who are here seeking asylum. So they're still kind of in the limbo of whether or not they're not sure whether or not they're actually going to be granted asylum. The way that we serve them is we get a call. We're not sure how they get a hold of our number because we don't do a lot of outreach. It's usually churches, Opportunity Council, the school districts who sends people to us. And we are able to provide emergency housing for a small amount of time. And it's for families. We're usually able to put them in a hotel for maybe 3 days, 5 days until they get connected back to Opportunity Council to see if they can get services. But during those 5 days, we try to connect them to other resources in the community to get them to network so they can find a room for rent. So they can, like Stephen said, it will be difficult for them to find an apartment. It has been done, but it's difficult. And then they can be stable for a little bit. And I'm going to talk about 2 different populations. So I'm going to right now focus on the asylum seekers. So once we meet them, we usually get them close as well because they don't have any, some groceries. We connect them to DSHS because they're eligible to apply for food assistance. And if they have children, they're eligible to apply for cash assistance as well, which is very helpful for them. We send them to the school district to register the kids to school, connect them to medical providers in the community, and getting them connected to health insurance as well. So that's them, right? And then we have some, when it's just single women or single men, we usually send them to base camp. There's 2 families in there right now, so I'm thankful for the Lighthouse mission as well. And we got a couple of young people in there too. And then now with the undocumented people, the ones that have been here for a while, the ones that unfortunately don't have a way to gain status. And that doesn't mean that they don't deserve to be here. And they don't have access to resources because they have no status. We have families who have children, but the children were born in another country. They don't get access to services, even though they have children. You have the program. Well, sorry, you're not eligible. And so we're able to pay for utilities. We are able to help them pay for a portion of the rent. The important thing that we try to do is to not have a lot of barriers for people to access the services. We are pretty small. There's only 3 of us, and we work part-time. The 3 of us work part-time, and we serve Whatcom and Skagit County. So our time is very limited, but we do what we can. So if someone calls and tells you you can't get a hold of them, it's because we're probably not working. Or if we are, we're probably talking to someone else. But with this undocumented families that often get overlooked, those are the farm workers, the ones that need a lot of assistance during the winter and the ones that don't get access to services. Or the ones who are afraid to ask for assistance because they know that they're probably going to be asking for a social security number and they don't have one. Medical, a lot of them don't have medical insurance, right? So sometimes we're able to make for medical appointments, medical bills that they might have. Groceries, that's another thing that we are able to help. And the funding that we have is not a lot, so it's not like I'm paying for months and months of rent, but just enough to get them stable. And our services, they're immediate. We try to be as immediate as possible. Just on Monday, I did an intake for someone who was seeking asylum. I probably did it like at noon, and I was able to get them in a hotel by 5 o'clock. Because that was when I had time to actually go and physically pay for the hotel because they want to see the card. So just so you know, just from January to today, we have seen 19 families who are seeking asylum just from January to today. So, and not even 4 months, right? It was 4 months, in 3 months, 19 families, that's 52 individuals. Some of them are eligible for services with the Opportunity Council. Some of them are not because they're single people. And we also see refugees, and the other ones that we see are we call them immigrants, but we know that they're undocumented. And we don't ask people whether or not they're undocumented necessarily. They kind of just themselves tell us. And they know that they can access their services because a friend of theirs, a family member of theirs who's undocumented, got services from us and they feel safe coming to us. Barriers, again, just not having that status. Language, it's another huge thing. Spanish, the majority of people, you press 1 for Spanish. But with that also comes digital literacy. Not everyone does not know how to navigate the phone tree system, okay? And then we have Mixteco speakers. Those are the indigenous languages of Mexico. And there's different types of Mixteco. And then we have indigenous languages from Central America as well. Nam, Nahuatl, those are the other languages that we serve. And I'm going all over the place. I'm looking at my notes, but the majority of people that we're seeing for the asylum seekers are people from Colombia, Venezuela, and a couple from Mexico, not a lot from Mexico. And we saw one from Haiti recently. But yeah, that's it from me.
Excuse me, Norma, thank you so much. You're doing so much with so little. You have a huge territory to cover, to serve. So I just want to express appreciation for that. And Kate Bartholomew asked a question of you in the chat. She's curious where most of your funding comes from. Is it private donations or government funds?
Private donations or foundations as well. So that's another thing that we are careful with. We recently decided not to do something because of all the everything they were asking from us. They were going to ask us for date of births, their people, and that's something we don't ask. We don't ask people's date of birth or anything. We ask for names and where they live, and if they're comfortable telling us to, they don't have to in order to receive services. So private donations, fundraisers that we have, and foundations. We did get a funding from the city of Mount Vernon. So that's for Skagit, which was great. And they knew what the type of people that we serve. They knew, but we had a city council member who really advocated for us to get that funding. So one of the barriers that people have to getting rental assistance from other places is because of the type of housing they live in. A lot of our families live in RVs or in a room, but in a house with 4 rooms and 4 families, and they're not going to be able to get assistance from anyone. Or the mobile homes that they live in, they're kind of falling apart. The roof is leaking, but that's what they can afford. So we're not gonna not serve them because of that. So we're able to pay. We feel part of us is like, why are we paying for them to live in this place? But that's their home. That's what they can afford. So we pay for it. So yeah, just we look for funding where they're not going to restrict us.
That makes total sense to me, because when you have funding from local government, they want you to have an inspection and have habitability standards, and that would get in the way of helping people to stay where they choose to be or where they can afford to be. There's another question in the chat. It's from Bart Hunter. Are you able to assist undocumented folks with obtaining legal status? Or if not, do you have any recommendations for that sort of assistance?
So we're not. That's a question that we often get, and no, we're not. We have a list of immigration, local immigration attorneys that we refer people to. Well, we don't refer them. We just like, here's a list of immigration attorneys in the community that you can.
My cat, sorry. She does this every single meeting I have from home, so I'm sorry.
And we just give it to them. And once in a while, we put immigration legal clinics so people can access a free consultation. Mm-hmm.
Do you work with law advocates on that at all?
We do.
Nice. Any other questions for Norma? I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. I mean, I feel like I learned more in the last 40 minutes about immigration than I have probably for my life. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate that you're serving a different population than Stephen is, and you're doing what you can to fill that gap, which is huge. So I just thank you. Oh, Vaughn has a question.
I was also wondering about do you also have, or do you have like a portfolio or a folder of like of landlords and host homes that you can refer people to? I'm sorry if you answered that and I can't remember.
No, we don't. So if someone is working in the fields, in farm, there's some farm workers that have farm worker housing. The difficult part here, kind of like Stephen said, is so and more for people who are undocumented and asylum seekers too, proving that you're working so you can make your monthly payment. There's some landlords that have been flexible where they say, okay, a letter from your employer will do. So there's been a couple of employers who are willing to say, yes, this individual's working, this is how much they're making, because they don't get check stubs sometimes. And people have to do what they have to do in order to survive. And so we just support them. And getting an ID for an undocumented person is difficult. That's another thing too. That's another barrier, getting an ID. And we know of a couple people in the community that rents, like I said, RVs, mobile homes. They're not the best. We don't refer people to those places. People get to those places on their own. Then they just come back to us and tell us we were able to secure a room in this house, or we were able to secure this mobile home. Can you help us with the deposit? And well, we don't go out to check to see how well the place is. We're like, okay, if it's safe for you, if you feel that's good for you, it's good for us. Yeah, that's how, yeah.
Is it when you said ID in it, is it also difficult for them to get a individual taxpayer identification number? Like that?
So that one, we do know a couple providers, and it's mainly because they speak Spanish in Skagit County where they can get it. And so we tell them where to go, because we want them to go to a physical place. That way they don't have to send any of the original documents to the IRS.
Thank you, Norma. You and Stephen are both getting shout outs in the chat, so just want to call your attention to that because you deserve
I
to
have
be
one
recognized.
more thing.
Oh, go ahead, Don.
So you said, Norma, you said with Spanish, and also Spanish. So there is a little bit more of a link to an ITIN for Spanish speakers, but if folks they speak the indigenous dialects, that the ITIN is even further away. Is that correct?
Because of the language barrier. We're very lucky. One of our board members speaks Mixteco, so for us, and she's always willing to help us. And then we have a volunteer that speaks Mixteco too. For the other languages like Dari, Farsi, we rely on Google Translate, and sometimes we get the services from the language exchange for any of the other languages that we don't have. And something I will say about, sometimes people think that when Mixteco, they're like, should we like translate it to Mixteco? So we have the digital literacy, right? And then we have, a lot of them don't know how to read. A lot of the Mixteco speakers don't know how to read. So that's another thing too. Just literacy overall, it's slow with some of the indigenous community. Not everyone, but a lot of them. So it's just that extra thing. And now I'm thinking about all the barriers, and I'm sorry. Intakes. They're difficult for people, especially when they're coming from a different country or when they're part of the minority. When you're asking about mental health, but it's not trauma. What trauma? That they're processing everything that they don't even know that that's what's happening to them, like that they're carrying trauma. And sometimes because they don't know how to answer that questions, they might be denied services. And yeah, even with Spanish, with me, when I'm talking to people from Colombia, Venezuela, I have to ask, what did you really mean by that? Because we use words differently. The culture is different. So culture, the barrier.
Thank you, Norma. Kate is wondering if you would mind putting your email in the chat in case there's follow-up.
I'm afraid to put my email in the chat.
I found your email on the internet, so.
So please know that we're doing the best that we can. Like I said, we do have limited funding. There's only 3 of us. One focuses in Skagit, because I told you this year we did 28 families, right? But that was just in Whatcom County. We did about the same in Skagit. So be patient. It takes us about sometimes 24 hours to get back, or 2 days to get back to people. So yeah, just be patient with us. And-
Alternatively, people could email me and I could just email
Oh,
you.
no, I don't mind sharing, but I'm just
Okay.
letting you know, just be patient with us.
Will do. You're doing a lot of work. Thank you. Are we ready to move on to the next speaker? Any other questions for Norma? Okay. Well, I see Don Cook on my screen right in front of me. Thanks for joining, Don. And you're at Unicare Northwest, and you're going to talk about an Apple Health expansion for immigrants?
Yes.
Thank you.
And so I'm Don Cook. I'm from Unicare Northwest. I'm an outreach enrollment supervisor here. And what we know about the Medicaid expansion is not much, unfortunately. We just got a email this week stating that we will get more information on what to expect to do moving forward at the end of April. So I have no answers for you whatsoever, but I can tell you that the funding is limited, because they were saying that they'll be able to enroll about 1,300 folks in Washington State. That's not enough. So I don't know what that's going to look like. And for the 1,300 people, that's for 19 plus, 19 and older. Or let me rephrase that, 19 to 64. Let's get that right. Yeah, we're just waiting to hear more about the process, what moving forward, what to do, and yeah. So there's just not much there to comment on with this expansion.
That sounds tricky. So if I'm understanding right, there's a Medicaid expansion for 1,300 immigrants for the entire state.
That's all. That's what they said.
You're going to be overrun.
Yes.
I mean, every clinic is, right?
And unfortunately, that's the other thing. Like, what are we going to do with the folks that don't qualify? What we tell them to get back onto because right now they can get onto a plan through the exchange. I call them like commercial plans, but they don't have the benefits of tax credit. So they're still spending a lot of money for these insurances. So there's really not a benefit for them to spend money that they don't have for insurance. So we'll help them with financial assistance through like Peace Health. They have like visits at Peace Health. We can do that for them. If they're a patient here at Unicare, we'll get them on our discount program. But for the expansion, it's just, we just shook our head when I saw that number. I said, oh, okay, great. Now what?
Sounds like your reaction was the same as mine.
Yeah. So more like I said, more to come in April. And once I found out more, Terry, I could send you that information as well.
Yeah, that would be great. I
Yeah,
know that you don't have a lot, but I'm wondering if documentation is going to be a barrier for folks.
And again,
don't know.
I don't know. I don't think it will be. But again, we'll find out more at the end of April.
Yeah.
Yeah. They really want to do this, but they're not putting all the effort into it. I think they should.
Yeah.
Make it more efficient for everyone.
I wonder once the scope of need is revealed as people try to pursue that insurance, that'll change, but I hope so.
Yeah.
I know you don't know much, but if there's any questions for Don, I would welcome them.
Yeah. And there are some parents that are actually they have an account already, but it's for their children. So we don't know if they're going to automatically get put on Apple Health or not, or what that looks like, or if they have to actually call into the state to get on that.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
So it's not set up yet. There's just more to come.
More to come.
Thanks so much, Don.
Yeah, but I'm here to answer questions that I don't have the answer to. If you want.
I appreciate that. Oh, just wait a minute, see if someone wants to ask anything. Kristen Hill
Vaughn.
says, thanks for the update.
Yep.
Vaughn, such a good question asker, Vaughn.
Insatiably curious I am. I wanted, uh-oh, it left. Oh, it came back. What was the timeline for
Oh,
this?
so it's going to start July 1st is what it's going to be.
Okay.
Start. But again, hopefully we'll be able to start enrolling folks in May, June. But again, it's going to go so fast. It's going to disappear within a week, less.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's good. For Washington State, that's just not enough. For Whatcom and Skagit, I think that could take care of all that.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
So
Any recommendations on which politicians to contact in particular for such?
I knew they were still looking for funding a while ago. So I know they were still looking. Yeah. I want to say no comment on that there, Vaughn.
That's wise. Anyone else? Okay, we have one more speaker. Andrea Cunningham, thank you so much for joining us from Catholic Community Services.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is gonna be a big letdown because I don't really have any thing much. I don't really have that much to share. I mean, we have done refugee services in the past, and that was before World Relief was in Whatcom County. And now that they are here, we don't have a refugee contract any longer. So we don't really have, I mean, we have done a lot. We are currently working with 3 asylee families, but we have no funding for it. Thankfully, Norma from Iris has helped those families out. And we've gotten some funding from the Opportunity Council to help with some rental assistance for them. But yeah, I mean, the really big barrier is we get calls from people, I think the same way that Stephen does, and I'm sure a lot of other people on this call do, that there's a family right now, they need help, what can you do? And I mean, I think the bigger conversation is, what can we do? Because the housing thing is really, really difficult, trying to find people apartments that are affordable or that will take people that don't have a rental history or stable employment. And employment's hard. So I don't really have any like good news to share. Unfortunately, like we don't have any funding for asylees or asylum seekers or for refugees or for any of those populations that Stephen mentioned. So referring them to us, like we'll be referring them back to other agencies. So I don't know. I mean, we've worked with them a lot, so I could answer questions, but I don't really have I don't have a good resource to share. I wish I did.
Andrea, that's actually really helpful to know because I didn't realize any of that. And
Good.
I'm getting a picture of how all of you work together, right? And make referrals to each other. And that we're all just trying to make the best out of the scant resources we have, no matter what problem we're trying to solve. So I really appreciate you sharing that because it's always been a little murky to me what CCS's involvement was with refugees. And it sounds like maybe you were, prior to World Relief, working with that that official refugee status run through the UN type of system.
Yeah, so prior to World Relief opening their office in Bellingham, CCS had a contract through the USCCB in the United States federal government. So they would give us certain refugee cases and special immigrant visa cases, the same cases that World Relief is now getting, which are those people that have waited forever in other countries and then come through the proper, like the official channels. So we did do that for, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years. And then when World Relief opened, they took that over since they're the experts in that. And we were just kind of doing it because there was a gap, because there was no one doing it in Whatcom County. And then since then, we, if there's an asylee family or, something kind of out there with nothing, we've, used kind of our knowledge from that and pieced together stuff for people. The 3 families we're working with right now, we are working with them and helping them, but I mean, it's a no official really, standing. We don't really have, there's no program or funding. We're just kind of doing it with what little like flex funding we have from donations and things like that. But it's it's so difficult.
This is just, it's really helpful for me to know, because, and probably everyone here, no one wants to refer someone somewhere that isn't able to help, doesn't help the person, it increases their trauma. We don't want that. So this is really good. Thanks so much.
Yeah, it is hard when you're like, it's like the worst thing is to be like, no, sorry, go back over here. And then the person's going around in circles.
Yes, exactly. Stephen has a question.
Yeah, not so much a question, but just something that I know that we've seen as being an increasing issue here. And I don't want to interject myself into anything else that we were going to be discussing with CCS. But I just wanted to make sure that we mention this before the meeting wraps up, in terms of, we see a lot of cases that are in the asylum seeker category who end up in Bellingham because they have come to the area hoping to get into Canada and have presented themselves at the Canadian border. And there's been a recent closing of, they really closed ranks in terms of ability of asylum seekers to get into Canada. So they get turned back around at the border and essentially end up homeless on the street in Bellingham. So I didn't know if others have been seeing that a lot, but that is definitely an increasing issue. And we've been talking with a few different people in the community around that. And I think it is, I think what I'm hearing from everybody is nobody has the ability to take this all on as like, this is our thing as an organization, but maybe we all have little parts that we could potentially play in that, pieces of the puzzle. So what we're lacking is someone to be the coordinator of all of those things. And it feels like a very piecemeal approach right now in terms of a quick phone call to Andrea, can you help? Nope, you can't help. So call Lighthouse Mission. Nope, they can't help. Call Opportunity Council. So in any case, that's what we're seeing a lot as well, is that's why many people are ending up in Bellingham, is they've tried to get into Canada, couldn't, ended up homeless on the streets of Blaine or in Bellingham. So
this is probably like very unpopular, but Bellingham is so expensive and there's no housing. It would almost be like, is there anywhere else you'd want to go? Because there's the housing options and the affordability, even when people do get jobs, it is so hard, because even the families that we're helping right now, they're in a habitat housing that's like the best we could find, that's month to month, and it's still so expensive that they can't, even when they're trying to work there, they can't afford rent. So it's just, I know, Stephen, you deal with that. We did that too. Finding apartments that can house folks that people can afford is almost impossible. So sorry for the bad news. It is kind of dire though.
It is, Andrea, and you have a sympathetic audience here. I think most folks here are concerned about homelessness or work in homelessness and experiencing that same crunch trying to support their clients. And Norma wanted to say something.
Yes, just because a good referral. So just because someone's an immigrant, so let's say that someone does have status, like they have permanent residency or are US citizens, like don't refer them to us, because we're probably gonna say we we will probably just refer them out again, because that's not, we're here to serve undocumented people, people with a wet status, and we try to focus on farm workers and people who don't speak English. That's another thing too. And we focus on the indigenous population, again, because of how hard it's for them to get resources in the community.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. That's important to know. Any other questions or comments before we go into updates?
Just one thing, I think Stephen just kind of mentioned like this, the coordination is really hard. And I know, with just the families that we're working with right now, it was really hard because they were coming into the Opportunity Council trying to get help, and we were helping them. And there was definitely like this weird, and then Norma had given us, we had gotten some funds, and it was definitely a lot of like bouncing around. So Gabriella, who works at OC, her and I are trying to set up like a monthly meeting so that we can kind of just touch base about any, like, these families or anyone else that we kind of come across, that we can make sure that there's good coordination. And we have been working closely with North Sound ACH, and I'm not sure if anyone from that organization is on this call. So it might be helpful to have a quarterly or something, just kind of check in. I'm not sure. It's hard because like resources are scant, but that's something that I know we're trying to work closer together with folks at the OC, so there is more coordination.
It's good to hear that's happening. Thanks for doing that, Andrea.
Yeah.
I think Vaughn has something to say.
Yeah, two questions. The first one is defining pathway to citizenship, and what is there just like one track of pathway to citizenship, and that's through the refugee status or granted asylee status, or and like, is there any, I'm just going to use the word hope, is there any hope for someone who is not who's ineligible and completely undocumented? Is there any pathway to citizenship whatsoever? And then my second question is pivoting to schools and public schools, and what is working well in working with folks who are connected with the school districts, and what is what could potentially be like another way to create more of a resilient connection and agile connection between your service.
Did he phrase while he was asking his question? Vaughn, are you with us?
Oh, am I frozen?
You're back.
Can you hear me?
You're cutting out a little bit.
Okay, so the first question was path. Oh no. How now? Video's off.
Better.
Any better? Video's off. Better? Okay. Refugee status and granted asylee seekers, or asylum. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. I'm gonna sit here awkwardly while I'm waiting for Vaughn to put his question in the chat, because I don't know what else to do.
I can speak just briefly to a little bit of his question regarding, pathway to legal citizenship and things like that. And I don't know all the ins and outs. I know that there has been talk for a certain population. So, for example, for Afghans who were paroled into the country following the fall of Kabul. There has been talk and hope of some type of adjustment of status for that population, but it has not, seems to have run up against a lot of political barriers. And so I think that even with something like that, it seems like broadly it makes a lot of sense to, as we have tens of thousands of Afghans who were paroled into the country, they need to have some kind of longer term permanent status. If we can't even manage to get that through Congress and get something going, I think the chances of other means of adjusting status for other populations feels, and again, I don't know all the ins and outs, but it feels remote given our current setup in Congress. So yeah, that's just speaking from our side and what we've seen regarding Afghans in particular. Same for Ukrainians. There's talk of potential long-term adjustment for some Ukrainians, but that doesn't seem to be going much of anywhere either.
Thanks for that, Stephen. Okay, looking at time, we got a little bit left, so I'm going to switch into updates. Kate Bartholomew, would you mind giving an update for the city?
I would be happy to. Hello, everybody. I'm sitting in for Katie Sullivan, who's out today, but I'm really happy I got to join because I learned so much. So thank you so much to the presenters. I do have several announcements. I'll try to be quick, but I'm going to put some links in the chat. The first is that our 2024 draft action plan for the city is has an open public comment period until April 10th. And I will copy that link into the chat right now. And I'll be honest, you know, it's like a template. It's not the most exciting reading. But basically this is how your tax money, our tax dollars get spent in the city in the next year. We call it the 2024 plan because we have a June to July year, so really it won't start until July, but it shows all the grant requests we've received, how we intend to allocate that funding. It's an unbalanced budget, meaning it shows all the requests and we have more requests than money, but we really do need comments. We haven't gotten any public comments yet, and this is the kind of thing where the rubber meets the road in terms of how our public dollars are spent for housing and human services for low-income residents and homelessness. So, you know, like I said, you can kind of skip a lot of the jargon. You can see on page 10, we've got all of the sources of funding where what we expect to receive. And then it gets really exciting on page 14 when we have a budget spreadsheet in tiny font with a lot of numbers on it. but you are all the practitioners in housing and human services, and so you do know the most about what the needs are in the community, and so we would like to hear from you as much as possible on that. The next update I have, which is also I think an important one for this group, is that the Bellingham plan is hosting a housing affordability open house at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, April 16th. And I will again put another link in the chat. There's an Eventbrite registration. You know, it's free to attend. We just ask people to RSVP. And I will be there as well, but it will be again a good this is a little bit broader of a plan. So the action plan that I just referred to is really our budget for low-income residents for housing and homelessness, et cetera. So very, very specific, kind of a small subsection of housing in general. This is sort of bigger picture housing affordability. So that's the subject you're interested in, have thoughts on, want to learn more about, want to talk to city staff about. The city staff who are putting that on are those who are long-range planners. So they're writing our plan for zoning and kind of the vision for Bellingham for the next 20 years. And there's multiple chapters in the comprehensive plan. They're calling it the Bellingham plan because that's more fun and cute and also, you know, less wonky. So if you'd like to attend, that's a great opportunity to do some more in-person engagement, and there'll be staff to talk to there. So, you know, that might be something that your neighbors, friends, you know, others might be interested in joining. So finally, I think the last update for this group is that if you don't know already, the first Portland Loo has gone in at Waypoint Park. So this is in response to the need in our community for more hygiene resources for the community in general, for the public and those living unhoused. And there's going to be 2 more installed in the fall, hopefully. And that's a great resource, and it's a kind of a toilet. It's called the Portland Loo, but it's a public toilet that was sort of designed to be you know, clean, durable, and discourage people lingering inside. So just do your business and move on, and hopefully that will be a great resource for those in the community. And I'll send a link. There's a page on the city website, and I just don't have the link right now, but I'll send that in a second. Any questions?
Do you know where the locations of the next 2 in the fall are going to be?
Thought you were going to ask me that, and I was hoping you wouldn't.
Sorry.
But the note, I'm not super involved on this project, but the note I have here says to be installed in along Railroad Avenue. So I don't know where along Railroad Avenue. Don't ask me where, but I think they're all going to be downtown.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions for Kate? I wasn't sure whether Michaela and Ashley wanted to do an update for the county or just pass because we don't have Chris with us today.
I did have a question for Kate. I'm sorry.
Oh, Devin, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I am curious about what the city has done with regards to researching overall hygiene needs and beyond the Portland Loos and the coming way station. What else is planned and what needs still exist in the community? And I'm kind of gathering that might not have been your direct task. And so I can also contact you by email, and maybe you can forward it to the people.
That would be great. I put the link to the webpage in the chat, which is hygiene resources in general in the city of Bellingham.
Okay.
And so it kind of gives an overview of
Sweet.
what there is, what is planned in terms of future needs. I really, you know, I probably shouldn't speak to that because it's not my area of expertise. But other than the way station and then the shower trailer behind City Hall, and obviously the Portland Loos, I don't know of other forthcoming hygiene resources.
Okay.
But
great.
if you want to email me, I can follow up with my colleagues.
Thank you.
Thanks. Michaela, I see you. I think Ashley's here too somewhere.
Yeah, I can give a quick update on the severe weather shelter stuff from this past winter. So we're still putting together the total costs of the severe weather shelter that was run by the county. So which it was separate from the winter shelter that Road to Home ran. Just a few quick numbers. We are open for 20 nights. We served 197 unduplicated households. And of those 20 nights being open, this is always something it's hard for me to say correctly, so bear with me. But out of those 20 nights, basically 947 beds were utilized, if that makes sense. Also, all the lights just turned off in this building, so that's really fun. But yeah, so that's kind of the main pieces there. We're still looking at how much operation costs were and breaking that down by each source. Just to note as well, of those 20 days, so we were told by the fire marshal that we could have 45 beds in the space that we utilized. And we had to get additional clearance to go over that, which we went over that 45 bed count over half of those nights, one of the nights being that we served 69 individuals. And so that was one of the nights we were open 24 hours a day. So we had like periods where there was different people staying for long periods, sleeping in rotation through that 24-hour period. So very busy, very, great to see people in the community, and it overall is really positive from my experience and what I heard from others. So more to come on that.
Thanks, Michaela. That's a lot of work. And I'm wondering if Ashley Berger might chime in a little bit for, still let us know how the winter shelter went at Civic Field.
Yeah, a little bit on the spot. I wasn't prepared to speak, Terry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Or maybe I was supposed to, and maybe I overlooked that. So, I don't have those numbers in front of me right now. Let me see if I can pull it up really quickly. Give me just a moment.
If you can't meet your numbers, that's fine. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. But just overall, how did things go? Did you have capacity issues like Michaela encountered?
So overall, the program went really well. You know, we took a lot of lessons that we learned from last year in doing severe weather shelter, which is what the county did, into our winter shelter. So our model was a little bit different. We were open for 3 months straight, opening December 1st, closing February 29th, I believe. It was the leap year, so there's an extra day. And yeah, I mean, we had a lot more staffing this year. Oh, look at Kate coming in. Thanks, Kate. I appreciate that. We did a lot of reporting. I swear we did track the numbers, but my brain has moved on. Yeah, Kate shared in the chat that the winter shelter served 307 unique guests over 90 nights of operations. And we served so many more individuals than that. We had a lot of touch points with people that we were turning away. Unfortunately, just due to capacity, we really tried not to when the weather was extreme. We did a lot of transportation to the severe weather shelter, and to other programs where we could. Helped folks engage in motel programs. As it made sense, we had a number of families come to us throughout the season, and we were able to pair them and connect them to other partners in the community. Yeah, we we definitely ran up against constraints with capacity. That was a big issue. We needed more beds. But I don't know if any of you have been in Civic Field locker rooms, but it is very difficult to pack more in. It's a concrete locker room. But I think we touched a lot of lives this season, and we helped a lot more people than just of what we sheltered, in providing resources and food and clothing and warmth to folks that we were turning away.
Thank you, Ashley, and I apologize for putting you on the spot. And thanks to you and Michaela and Kate at the city for making sure that our most vulnerable folks had a place to stay when it was really cold. And obviously there's a need, and our community has a lot of work to do because it's not going to go away. It'll happen again next year, and it might be bigger. So we need to start planning, even though we're just wrapping up. I'm just going to do a quick update from the Homeless Service Center. The PIT count numbers are being tabulated. Our data analytics manager does that data work, and she is working to calibrate with the Department of Commerce to make sure that our numbers are jiving, and then that will be released probably late April is probably optimistic. I think it's probably going to be May that will come out. The shower program behind City Hall has offered 1,200 showers now, which I think is amazing. So great need for that resource. I'm glad it's being used. Still working on the way station. Anticipation is going to be opening, I think, September to October. It's construction, so you know how that goes. But we're looking forward to that. And for folks who don't know, Way Station is in a health department building on 1500 North State Street. The downstairs of it is being separated into 2 halves. One half is hygiene services, and health clinic services. So Unity Care will operate that. They'll have showers and laundry and restrooms, and also clinical professionals. And then the other side is going to be medical respite for folks who are homeless and are being discharged from the hospital but still need to recuperate. And Opportunity Council, in fact, Marisa, if she's still here, is going to be running that part of the program. Erin, I think, is here. I see her name. Erin has she's on our hot team. She's taken another position in the agency, which is really exciting, but this means we're going to have an opening on the hot team, and that listing will probably come out next week. I'm thinking probably Monday. So if you know anybody who's interested, please encourage them to apply. And my last update is that our coordinated entry system has a partnership with both obviously Opportunity Council Housing Development, but also with Mercy Housing Development. And so this month, 6 seniors that are experiencing homelessness are leasing up at Laurel Forest. That's the Opportunity Council project on State Street. That's very exciting. And 15 families they're experiencing homelessness are leasing up at Millworks, which is Mercy Housing's new project that is right adjacent to OC's building at 1111 Cornwall. It's kind of a part of the waterfront there. So that's really exciting, good things that I get to share. And that's all I have to say. It's 5:02. I really appreciate everyone staying so long. I'm sorry I didn't get the time right. Didn't get the time right. But there is public comment, so I'm willing to stay if anyone would like to just share what's on your mind. Otherwise, thank you for joining me. Thank you so very much to our presenters. I mean, I learned a ton this afternoon and very much appreciated. So yeah, take care, everybody.